back to the Naturally Balanced Hormones Show. I am your host, Marissa Fay of Marissa Fay Wellness. I am a board certified holistic nutritionist, a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, a yoga teacher, a group fitness instructor, a hypnotherapist. What else? I'm sure I have other credentials. I love learning, y'all. So that's something to know about me. And on this show, I am here to demystify the things that you think you know about how to be healthy as a woman, especially women dealing with fatigue, inability to lose weight, hair loss, skin problems, period problems, sleep problems. I got you. You are in the right place. In today's episode, I want to talk very candidly with you about weight loss and my personal use of GLP-1 medication. So let's get into it. So, first of all, it's really important to have some background here. I was looking back because I went to create a post for Instagram and I was looking back to try to quantify some things for you all. And I think it's really helpful context to understand why I talk about this subject, how I talk about it. For many years in my business, I've been hesitant to talk about this because I didn't feel like I had the answers, to be quite honest. I have been focused in some way, shape, or form on losing weight for about 17 to 18 years of my life. That is a little bit less than half of my life at this point, which is a crazy and wild thing to say. And I'm wondering if you can relate to that. There are obviously a ton of societal pressures, but I really feel like as a millennial, I grew up with like skinny and stick straight hair was the way to be. And that was not who I was. Believe it or not, I have curly hair, which you all have seen in some of the episodes. But I have never been naturally skinny or thin. I don't believe that I ever will be, and that's not really my goal. However, I was really unhealthy. And at the highest weight that I ever was, which was about 260 pounds when I was 20, 21 years old, I was depressed. I had a lot of period troubles, period pain, long periods. I had immense hair loss. I had a binge eating disorder. I just did not look healthy and well. And if you want to see what that looks like, you can check out my Instagram profile or my TikTok profile. I'm just at Marissa Fay Wellness, kind of everywhere. And you can see pictures of what that looked like. It's really difficult for me to see those pictures, by the way. And I actually didn't have any. My best friend had to text me pictures. This is years ago when I started talking a little bit more about weight in my business. And I was like, I need some photo evidence because I had gotten rid of a lot of it because it was so painful to see that version of me. Now, I grew up with plenty of trauma in the home, plenty of traumatic events growing up, family situations, also a strong dieting culture where just eating less, eating low fat, eating a lot of synthetic foods was really the path. And my body just didn't respond. Like I started dieting when I was 11 years old. I did the Slim Fast diet. I did this diet that was like a flank steak diet that my mom did. The grapefruit diet. I did the Atkins diet. I'm the only person I knew at the time who did not lose weight on the Atkins diet, actually. Because, fun fact, my body and many bodies, especially women's bodies, actually need carbs. It's wild. We actually need carbs. And that's true of hormone production, but especially thyroid hormone production, which is something that those of us who have experienced a lot of stress in our lives growing up, we almost guarantee have cortisol regulation issues. When you have cortisol issues, you almost guarantee have thyroid issues. Now, whether or not that thyroid issue is a diagnosable disease, that's not my area of expertise. That's when you go see a doctor to be diagnosed with something. But my area of expertise is how all of this comes together and how to optimize your well-being when you do not have a diagnosed disease, or even if you do and you want to work on it, right? And so I pretty much came into my early 20s with immense cortisol dysregulation, thyroid dysfunction, all the symptoms of PCOS, all the symptoms of insulin resistance, and a whole heck of a lot of trauma, especially related to dieting. And I'm about 5'8", to give you perspective. I know when I was kind of on the journey to figuring out weight loss and figuring out my hormones, I always really wanted to know people's stats. And there's a lot of I feel like there's a lot of push-pull in the conversation around like, well, don't compare your body. But I'm not telling you that so you can compare your body. I'm telling you that so you have a sense of like where I've been and understand that I see you. I see you. I understand you. I understand your struggles. And I am the hero of my own story, but I also am an incredible guide now that I have been doing functional nutrition for 8 years and guiding other women. So that's what you really need to take away from this. So, and this fun camera, always giving us a run for our money and adjusting. So, anyways, about 21, about 260 pounds. Then I started to really make weight loss and becoming healthier, which I considered the same thing, which a lot of us do. They are not the same thing, actually. They are two independent things. They overlap in a Venn diagram, but weight is a symptom. Okay. When the body is holding on to fat, it is doing so, at least in part, for protection. And I really strongly believe that and see that, whether that's emotional protection, whether that's protection from toxins, because it can literally wall off in the fat excess hormones like excess estrogen. It can literally wall off toxins that you've been exposed to, chemicals that it can't process out correctly. So it stores fat for a reason. You gain weight for a reason. You hold on to weight for a reason. It's not just because you have bad luck or bad genes. Okay. So that's really, really important for you to be aware of. But I really started out when I was shortly after my 21st birthday, where I was like, okay, no more, right? I'm going to figure this out. I actually started taking nutrition classes in undergrad. I started studying exercise and nutrition, and a lot of what was readily available and easily accessible. And this is before like we had so much access to so much information, right? But a lot that was readily accessible was like, okay, 1,200 calories, do lots of cardio, eat low fat. And so I did that. And I learned how to count calories. And I would literally round up my group of friends at like 8 p.m. on a Tuesday and be like, this is when we can all go to the gym. Let's go. We're going to Stairmaster next to each other and catch up. Um, and I would do things like make lasagna with like low fat cheese and with turkey and feed my roommates. And I did start losing weight, but I think it might surprise people that it went so incredibly slowly. So weight loss for me coming into it, even as a young person with such dysregulated hormones, went so slowly, in part because of my excessive exposure to stress and cortisol imbalance as a result of that, but also because I had dieted so much in the past. And so the next kernel that I want you to take away from this is the more that you have dieted, the longer it will take for you to lose weight. And the more important it is for you to not do extreme things like intermittent fasting or fasting or extreme calorie counting, really restrictive low calorie counts or extreme exercise programs. The more important it is to not do that, actually, because you're just going to further trigger that cortisol imbalance. You're going to further trigger blood sugar dysregulation. You're going to further trigger your body saying like, holy crap, we got to hold on to all of this. This is not safe. She is doing things that are not safe. We've got to be in survival mode. Because guess what? Your body doesn't know the difference between a famine and you dieting, because there's actually abundance around you, but you want to lose weight. Your body doesn't know. So I started down that path. And within a couple of years, I had lost 50 to 60 pounds. And I wanted to go further. I really felt like there was more that my body had to lose, frankly. And I still agree with that. There was more my body had to lose. However, I decided to become a vegetarian, which meant that I was depleting my body of a lot of nutrients and losing access to a lot of high quality protein sources. And I also started doing things like training for a half marathon and running and teaching group fitness, where I was teaching like boot camp class and Pilates mat class back to back with a cycling class. And well, I learned so much teaching group fitness, and fitness is such a love of mine. It really is such a love of mine. And I am now an active person today because of that version of me who got so into moving my body, frankly. So I'm so incredibly grateful for that. But it also just further brought more fatigue, more mood imbalances, more drive to have episodes of binge eating, more hair loss, more cold hands and feet, more brittle nails, more skin problems, more period problems, more digestive problems. Like it just, the list goes on. My body rebelled. And at that point in time, I was actually managing a wellness center. And I remember like basically saying to everybody there, like, I'm your guinea pig now. Like, I had to be able to promote our services and talk with patients. And I was like, okay, I have to understand everything that we're doing here in order to do that. And so that's really when I got my first big taste of like holistic practices, integrative practices, which are different. Let me know in the comments if you want to hear more about that. Very different. Holistic is different than functional medicine, is different than integrative. I know that's a lot, but they are all very different methodologies. There's some overlap in some ways, but they're all different. And I was exposed to bits and pieces of all of that except functional medicine at that time, for the record. People thought they were doing functional medicine, but they, in fact, were not, is what I would say. Now that it's what I practice, right? I have a much better perspective of it. But I really was stuck for many, many years. And I would kind of float up and down by 5 to 10 pounds. And so the lowest I really got at that time in my life was like in the 190s. Yeah, in the 190s. And then I moved to Colorado. I started doing CrossFit. I saw the deterioration and end of my marriage because I got married in my 20s, went through divorce, started losing a little bit more, which initially felt good. It was like that initial rush of like immense cortisol, immense hormonal imbalance, where at first things swing really high, especially due to the CrossFit, but also under eating, still under eating. I was doing macro tracking and I was super low fat, super high protein, moderate carb, which also, it turns out, not best for us to be doing long term, by the way. And I found myself get down to like the mid 180s. And life plays cruel jokes on us, right? Because it was my first time really being single in a body that I thought looked pretty good. I was like a size 12, but I had a lot of evidence of where I had been, a lot of loose skin. And I didn't have too much body baggage about it until I dated someone who essentially dated me, claimed they loved me, and then broke up with me because my body was something they weren't attracted to after a year and a half. And that created an immense trauma related to my experience of my body and kind of proved right everything the world told me about my value related to my body. And that really started kind of the next phase of the journey, right? And in that time, I was studying nutrition. I had become a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. I had become a yoga teacher. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to really focus on just super nutritious foods and let my intuition guide me. It was really when like the intuitive eating movement was like taking up more space, and sounded so good, right? It sounds so good to just like listen to your body. Your body's going to tell you what it needs to eat and wants to eat. Bullshit. Bullshit. So if you're a woman who's done any amount of dieting, if you have any amount of trauma in your past, you have a decision to make, right? When it comes to the intuitive eating movement, which is, can I accept and be okay with my body expanding potentially quite a lot? And also the hormonal imbalance that accompanies that potentially. I'm not saying that everybody who gains weight is unhealthy. That's not true. But a lot of us who do gain weight and are kind of wired in a way to gain weight easily gain this more pro-inflammatory type of body fat that further dysregulates hormones and causes us a lot of problems now and in the future. So it's not symptom-free weight gain, right? It's weight gain that comes with other symptoms when we add on more body fat and really bog our bodies down. Okay. And I am in that camp, is what I will say to you. So went through that, went into a series of another set of relationships, right? And, during what was the pandemic, gained back about 40 pounds. And that was devastating. That was devastating. Because I really wanted to believe and have faith that like I could just follow these instincts my body has. Now, I tell everybody intuitive eating, if it works for you, fantastic. But there are a lot of us who it doesn't work for because it really doesn't take into account you giving your body what it needs. And sometimes we have to do things when it comes to the food that we eat, not because it feels, oh, yummy, and because it feels good, but because it's what our body needs. A great example is if you're somebody who wakes up and isn't hungry, not eating breakfast. That ultimately, in the long run, I have seen for most women, not a good idea, right? So we actually have to make ourselves eat something for breakfast. And that can feel hard, like a tough pill to swallow if you're like, I can just follow my body's intuition. Such a lovely thought again, but not practical if you have goals, frankly, related to your metabolism, your hormones, and your weight. Just not practical, in my opinion, for most of us. So I had a wake up call then. And this was a couple of years ago. And I was like, crap, this is not working. And I do not want to be this size. I wasn't as able to be as mobile, as physically active, enjoy the outdoors as much. I didn't feel as good of energy. My periods were starting to get weird again. My digestion wasn't great. My hair wasn't great. And I was starting to see all these signs that I was deteriorating. I tested my gut. I tested my blood work, I tested my hormones, and things were not looking good. Things were not heading in the right direction by being more intuitive with what I was eating, in addition to my weight not heading in the right direction. And I really got stuck on cortisol at that time. So, cortisol is a hormone, it is one of our stress hormones. It is incredibly important because our bodies no longer know the difference between a bear chasing us and a stressful meeting, or a bear chasing us and a stressful relationship. And we tend to, especially women in our 30s and 40s, we tend to have put ourselves in situations where we are high stress, where we are relied upon a lot, where we have to be perfect or really good at things, where we have to hold things together, where we have to serve multiple roles that are high stress. And we don't take care of ourselves, taking that into consideration. Because if you are in those situations and you are under eating and you are exercising a lot or not at all, and you are scrolling late at night and not prioritizing sleep, and you are not eating enough protein, and you are not eating breakfast, and you are not filtering your water and getting non-toxic water and hydration in, and I could go on and on. When we are not taking really, really fantastic care of ourselves, those things just deteriorate us more and more and more via the impact it has on our cortisol, which is why I talk about cortisol so damn much, why I have a whole masterclass for you all that's completely free, talking all about what you need to know about your cortisol. Because at that point, relearning cortisol, because I'd already learned about cortisol. I was years into my business helping other women with their gut health and their hormone imbalances. I didn't have a specialty of weight loss at that time because I really didn't feel confident, right? I had done the up and down and up and down, and I was like, maybe I know nothing about this, right? And so at that point, I became really obsessed with cortisol, and I became really obsessed with linking together all of my training in our mind and our energy. So my background with things like hypnotherapy and yoga and meditation and nervous system regulation, I became really obsessed with how does that combine with my understanding of functional medicine, of gut health, of hormone function, of women's health, of holistic nutrition. How does that come together? And really, cortisol and our nervous system is the bridge. And I became obsessed. I completely overhauled how I ate. I completely overhauled my exercise routine. I completely overhauled my day-to-day habits. I mean, I hardly recognize myself sometimes these days. And I will tell you, for the most part, I'm healthier and happier than I've ever been. And I weigh the least I've ever weighed as an adult. So going through that process and overhauling all of that, I naturally then lost all the weight I had regained. And I found myself about 190, high 180s. And at that point, I was like, okay, girl, like I want to break this plateau, what I consider to be a decade-long plateau where I could not break really the 180s without crazy extreme measures. I remember with my ex-husband, we went on a trip to Costa Rica. And before that trip, I had really starved myself, like truly 1,200 calories, no binging episodes, tons of exercising, 2 days in the gym. And I saw a number in the 170s for the first time as an adult. And I was like, this is amazing, but holy crap, I can't maintain this. I can't maintain this. Devastating, devastating. Okay. Like I know what that feels like. So about 2 years ago, at the end of not 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, kind of towards the end of 2023, I started studying peptides, and not just GLPs. There are many other peptides, but I started studying peptides and I started using them. And there are a number of different peptides that I really credit with helping me break this plateau and further heal my metabolism. I did also things like wearing a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, to really notice how my body was responding from a glucose perspective to different foods that were considered healthy foods, but not agreeing with my body, right? Getting customized and down into the weeds in it. I started really, really focusing on that. And I also started about I'm going to give you the month because depending on when you watch this, right? So, about April, May of 2024, I started using a low dose amount of a GLP medication or GLP peptide because technically they're not medications, they're peptides and they've been available for quite some time. But I started using a low dose of that, and I'm not giving you any kind of medical advice. I'm only sharing my personal experience. But I had started using a low dose of that. And at that point, I was in the high 180s. So again, for me, like a decent place to be weight wise. But I just always knew there was more to give. And I knew there was metabolic damage that still needed to be healed. And I was really encouraged reading the literature about the use of GLPs and the way that they can help with healing metabolic dysfunction, the way that they can potentially help with organ function. There are some pretty incredible studies on cardiovascular health, on kidney health. I believe we'll continue to have more, some of them even on brain function. I think we'll continue to have more and more of that. And I also really loved that with what I was reading and what I was observing and in talking with other clinicians, it really seemed like if you use the lowest amount possible to start to see the needle move in what you were looking at and what you were monitoring, that you could see improvements and then slowly scale back and hold those improvements. Because I'm not interested in quick weight loss that that's it, right? I'm interested in sustainable. I want to be the person who defies the odds in the studies, which for most of my weight loss history, I actually have. And what I mean by that is most studies, like over 90% of people regain all the weight and then some that they've lost. I had that one significant regain in 2020 and 2021, but then I lost it again, which is very rare. And I didn't regain all of it, which is also very rare. And so I am looking to maintain what I've lost. And since that point in 2024, I've lost about 25 additional pounds. And I have done it in a really mindful way. I've taken very seriously maintaining my muscle mass, my exercise routine, my nutrition routine, monitoring my blood work, my day-to-day habits, my nervous system habits, the other nutrients I'm making sure are a part of my life and my supplement routine. I have taken this incredibly seriously. I cannot emphasize that enough because again, my goal is to maintain as much muscle mass as I can because we need that in order to age in a healthy way and maintain insulin sensitivity long term. But my goal is to long term be the healthiest version that I can of myself. And that also for me means that my weight is at a place that I feel comfortable. So that is some of my journey with peptides, with weight loss. And I am really curious to hear from you all, to hear what you want to learn more about. I am brainstorming ways to bring more of what I did and what has worked and helped me both naturally in losing weight and also using some of these peptides, which are still natural, by the way, but using some of these peptides as aids in low doses, right? In amounts that are appropriate for my physiology. And you would want to use that's appropriate for your physiology if it's something that you consider. So I'd love to hear from you what you'd like to learn more about when it comes to weight loss and when it comes to GLPs. So let me know in the comments or drop into my DMs because I really want this show to be a place that supports you and that brings you more guidance and information. And I'll probably do an episode following this that's like kind of the myths and what I've experienced. But I also can talk more about things like side effects, things like my plan for how I'm going to be using it. I can't give you my exact dosing because that would fall under more medical advice, but I can certainly share a little bit about where I'm coming from with that. And potentially connect you with some resources to support you in that way. So let me know in the comments. As a reminder, you can find me on Instagram or TikTok at Marissa Faye Wellness. You can also find me at marissafaye.com. And I have a link for you below if you want to take my cortisol masterclass completely free. It's going to give you some ahas when it comes to weight loss because most women need to focus a ton on cortisol and are not. It really was the key that unlocked my metabolism after my regain and being completely locked up just from my childhood and all of the experience I had, like dieting and really running my body into the ground. So I cannot recommend enough focusing on cortisol and at least taking this free masterclass. So you can check that out in the links below as well. And I hope you'll tune in, and I'll see you in the next episode.